It's time for the Monster of the Week Christmas special! I mean, technically it's after Christmas, but that's never stopped me before. Today we're gonna be unpacking one of the most notorious, legendary, and enigmatic creatures to ever grace the halls of nerd culture. Today, we're talking about Grue.
What?
Sorry, the Grue, which, despite their name, have nothing to do with the plot to finally take down Jason Bourne or whatever Despicable Me is actually about. This monster is likely to elicit one of two reactions whenever you mention its name. Either a flood of nostalgia and memories, likely involving repeated character death in dark dungeons.
It's been 84 years.
Or a confused face bearing no semblance of recollection. Grue were popularized largely due to Zork, a text-based adventure game released in 1977, which spiraled out into a ton of sequels and spin-offs. Zork itself is one of those extreme deep cuts into nerd culture that is super prevalent in the background if you know what to look for, and there's a good chance you might own this game without even knowing it. See, Zork was made by a little company called Infocom, and Infocom was acquired by Activision in 1986. Why is that even remotely relevant? Well, if you owned the first Call of Duty Black Ops or Black Ops Cold War, both games published by Activision, you also own a copy of Zork. By typing Zork into a computer terminal in either game, it will literally just let you play the entire thing start to finish, which is hilarious, but I digress. Grue are a tricky creature to convert into D&D because they don't really have much of a description beyond slavering jaws in the dark. And they're less of a monster to fight and more the promise of death, meant to dissuade the player from wandering too far into darkened areas without a proper light source. They are terrified and actively harmed in some instances by light, which is definitely good information to have, but at this point, the Grue are more of a nebulous obstacle or trap rather than a creature to be encountered in a game like D&D. However, upon doing some digging, I learned that Zork is not actually the origin of the Grue species. The first time Grue would ever appear anywhere would be in the Dying Earth series created by Jack Vance in the 1950s. If that name sounds familiar, it's probably because his stories are also one of the principal elements that inspired D&D's Vancian magic system. In his stories, the Grue are also left purposefully undefined and vague, as they're meant to be this sort of creature lurking in the darkness. Jack does give us a few choice descriptions though, such as being part ocular bat, part unusual hoon, and in later works would describe them as having scaly gray skin, fish-like faces, sharp claws, and fangs. All the official artwork of the Grue only makes this more confusing, whether it be from the Zork games, Zork Choose Your Own Adventure books, or something connected with the Dying Earth novels. The picture is never quite clear. Sometimes we get depictions that show just their eyes, and sometimes we get things reminiscent of the Invisible Stalker artwork in the Fiend Folio, which, as hilarious as that is, all these conflicting representations and vague bits of artwork lead us to one conclusion. These lurkers in the dark are borderline unknowable, and that is perfectly valid as a way to use them. Rather than having a monster stat block, you could simply use them as a dungeon hazard. If you venture into an area of a dungeon without a proper light source, then a Grue comes on in and snatches you up. Maybe there are some more skill checks involved somewhere in there, but overall, I really like the idea of using this monster as more of an obstacle to be overcome than just a fight or social encounter. So give it a try sometime. But that's all I got for you this week. Thanks for watching. Is what I would say if I didn't make a stat block for you to unleash on your players. I totally get the whole point of Grue in the novels and in the video games is to be this horrible monster in the darkness, but in D&D, if you don't want to use them as an obstacle, you need stats. Combat is by far the biggest part of D&D 5e as a system, so I intend to give you some stats that you can use with that. However, before I could do this, we do need to agree on an artistic interpretation of the thing, so I tasked my friend and channel artist Tam with making some updated Grue artwork, and they did not disappoint. This is gonna be our 5e Grue, a horrible monster with slavering fangs, razor-sharp claws, and all the awful features you would expect to see on a subterranean darkness-dwelling monstrosity. I felt like CR9 was a suitable challenge rating for this creature because we want them to be incredibly lethal to all but the most seasoned adventurers, and even then, they should be nasty to contend with. Obviously, I gave them a claw attack and a fang attack that both do some decent damage, with the fang attack also grappling and restraining the target. This will allow the Grue to leap from the darkness and snatch up an enemy, but more importantly, if the target is still in its jaws on the next round, it can use its swallow action, which has a lot of text, but it works the same way as most swallow abilities in 5e do. The creature gets stuck inside, takes acid damage, and if they can do enough internal damage to the Grue, it'll barf them back up. But most importantly, it is now possible to be eaten by a Grue at the D&D game table. In order to nail all the flavor of the Grue, I gave them a couple traits that I felt were also fitting. For one, they've got a darkness aura that creates a 15-foot area of magical darkness all around them, which means you'll need light created by a spell of 3rd level or higher to actually reveal their true form. They also have a 300-foot dark vision and the ability to see through magical darkness, so if they do get the drop on an unprepared individual, they're gonna have advantage on all of their attacks and the target disadvantage unless they find a way to see them that doesn't rely on sight. If they are revealed by any kind of light, however, they will be subject to their light hypersensitivity trait, which deals 25 radiant damage to them every turn that they start in bright light and imposes disadvantage on everything, even in dim light. They're also vulnerable to radiant damage, so that means they're actually taking 50 damage per turn spent in bright light, which is really bad for them. I also gave them perception, stealth, and survival as skills so they could more easily track their prey through the shadows, as well as the shadow stealth bonus action, which is borrowed from the vampire Nightbringer, allowing them to take the hide action as a bonus action on their turn if they're in dim light or darkness. Overall, this is a fairly simple stat block, but it has a few neat tricks, and most importantly, I think it really fits the idea of what a Grue could look like in a game system like D&D. But wait, I hear some of you saying, the Grue have already been in D&D, and that is legally true. Kind of. In good old Planescape, because of course it would be Planescape, there are a cast of creatures called Grue, and there are 4 different types of them. These Grue are all low-level elemental minions from the 4 primary elemental planes, which is kind of fun, but also not even remotely the same creature. Apparently they were somewhat inspired by Vancian Grue, but I don't really see it. That's not to say they're bad creatures. In fact, they're kind of fun, and maybe someday I'll do a video about them. But as it pertains to the darkness-dwelling Grue a la Zork, I'm literally only bringing this up so that I don't get actually'd by the comment section. As far as using these creatures at the game table, however, there are a bunch of different things we can do here. Grue can make for great random encounters in any place where there are pockets of darkness. The Underdark, Shadowfell, or even something more domestic like a cave system or abandoned ruin can all make for likely Grue hangout spots. I really like the idea of using them in a horror-centric way because for any onlooker with dark vision, since their magical darkness aura is, well, magical, they would just appear as blobs of darkness moving through the dungeon halls, gibbering and gurgling as they look for the best angle to ambush the party. Not knowing what's in that area of traveling darkness can be just as scary as actually encountering the thing, and if you happen to have someone in the party who can see through magical darkness, showing them, and only them, the artwork, or just giving them a description of what they see so they can pass it along to the other players, is a very fun, creepy moment. If you've got a dungeon that is just infested with these things, maybe you even give the party access to a lantern or something that burns with magical light, thus keeping the creatures at bay while they navigate through the abandoned halls of an ancient ruin. But once they get to the center of the dungeon and claim whatever prize there is to claim, they discover the treasure vault is enchanted with an anti-magic aura. Normally that wouldn't be a huge deal, and they might detect this ahead of time if they're careful, but more likely than not, they'll discover this when the magic lantern goes out, thus ending the daylight spell or whatever was cast on it, leaving them with mundane torches in the dark. Then, they have to navigate their way back out while the Grue stalk them relentlessly. Seeing as how they don't really have any official D&D lore, you can also tweak them to whatever ends you see fit. I mean, that's literally always true, but a creature like this has little to no player expectation once revealed, so they could very easily be used as a subterranean race of dwarves who were sealed off when their city collapsed, and over time some magical force twisted them into these horrible creatures. Or maybe they're actually a type of elemental creature native to the elemental plane of Earth. Or heck, you could even make them more intelligent, give them access to common, and then have them function as some sort of subterranean species of intelligent creatures creatures and then have them hunt your adventuring party to the death. If you wanted to bring them up to the surface, they would also be fantastic nighttime ambushers, stalking the darkness around whatever type of camp your players establish on their travels. But no matter what you choose to do with these creatures, as always, the 5th edition stats for them are linked in the description down below. And over on the Dungeon Dad Patreon, you can find the high-res PDF stat block, which contains all the same game information, but is presented in a little bit more fanciful presentation as my way of saying thank you to the folks who provide that extra level of support for this channel and help me do what I do here. This video specifically goes out to Commander Blackheart, who has been suggesting the Grue for the past 3 years and never gave up hope they might show up on the channel someday. Sorry it took so long, but hey, we managed to get it done before GTA 6. This was genuinely such a great suggestion because I was not expecting to go down this rabbit hole of weird video game adjacent lore. I wasn't expecting to find out that Zork's in Call of Duty Black Ops, so hey, we all learned something new. And I also want to give a huge shout out just to the community at large because we hit 200,000 subscribers over the past couple weeks here. That's crazy. I never imagined that the channel would get to the point it's at now. So thank you guys all for your relentless support over the years, whether you're new to the channel, if this is the first video you're watching, sorry. Or for those of you who have been suggested monsters for 3, 5+ years only to finally see them come into the channel this month. Whatever the case is, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the support you guys offer me. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Till then.